60 Minutes with Angela starts right now.
Now, since her appointment as Executive Secretary of PTAD, that's the Pension Transitional Arrangement Directorate, on the 6th of October 2016, till she left office on the 20th of August 2019, my guest today has served Nigeria and President Buhari's administration in two further capacities. She was appointed Minister of State for the Environment on the 21st of August 2019, and subsequently the Minister of State for Niger Delta Affairs. That was from 13th July 2022 till date. And she hopes that her service to the nation will align with one of her favorite sayings by Thomas Paine. Quote, "The world is my country. All mankind are my brethren, and to do good is my religion." End of quote. Minister of State for Niger Delta Affairs, SHARON IKEAZOR, joins me on the program today. Thank you very much for speaking with me today. I wanted us to start, where you started as Executive Secretary of PTAD, that's Pension Transitional Arrangement Directorate. I wonder if you know how people miss you in PTAD. Many of the pensioners think that the president was wrong to remove you from there, even when you try to rationalize with them and say, moving from there as Executive Secretary to Minister of State was a kind of promotion. They were not having it. So I wonder if you know how much you are missed in that place.
I actually do, because I'm still in touch with every pensioner.
Wow.
Because even when I moved to Ministry of Environment,
yes,
the environment affects the pensioners.
Right.
So I was in touch with them. And I assured them that I had left a strong institution behind.
Mm.
So all the changes that we had made and the improvements we had made, yes, would continue, and I'm glad PTAD has continued without me there. Yes.
Okay, so tell me what you would consider to be three major things that you achieved in PTAD that turned around the way we administer pensions in this country.
Okay, let me explain to you. Under PTAD, the pension scheme that we run is the defined benefit scheme, while PENCOM runs the new pension scheme,
right,
which is the contributory pension scheme.
Right.
So this old defined pension scheme had been fraught with a lot of fraud. Mm. I mean, you're a media person.
Yes.
You know the outcry from pensioners.
Mm.
So what we did was to revitalize the whole system, digitize it, clean it up, and restore hope in the pension system, and also restore hope, restore confidence and trust in government by the people. And how did we do this? We started with the pensioner engagements in the 6 geopolitical zones,
right,
and we got to know what their issues were.
Okay, before you came in, I understand that only one geopolitical zone, I think the Northwest.
Northwest, yes, I'm getting to that, yes.
Yes.
So we now started the verification of the other 5 geopolitical zones. And our method of verification was new as well to the pensioners. We restored their dignity. and we did it with empathy. These were pensioners that would line up under the sun. Some would sleep in the state where they've come to do their verification, which may not be their state of residence.
Yes.
But in this case, we went to their states. And in those states, we rented halls, air-conditioned halls. We gave them water, and we served them lunch for verification. Those who could not come out to verification due to old age or infirmity due to ill health.
Yes.
We went to the hospitals to verify them. We started a mobile verification system because we had a department that we empowered to do that, the Pension Support Service Department.
Yes.
So you call in with your complaints, you write in, and tell us of your infirmed aged person who cannot come to the verification. We actually go to them to verify them. And we've gone to a lot of remote villages across Nigeria.
So the picture we used to see, you know, in those days you come into Abuja or some of the states, you see people, pensioners is gathered somewhere, and they're there under, come rain, come shine, you know, exposed to the elements. We don't see that again.
No, we eliminated all of that because we have built that trust that do not come to us, we will come to you. And we had a call center where they could call in as well through the phones.
Right.
So that's one of the things we achieved, that verification. Then the second one was the digitization of the system and the elimination of fraud. So you could not have multiple pension registrations. You know, we had cases of where people will bring in fraudulent documents and be registered, claiming pensions. Yes. And we were using, and also we were using the government integrated information system, GIFMIS, financial system, GIFMIS. So these payments were now being made directly to the pensioners' accounts. And BVN helped as well, because with that BVN, we cleaned up the inherited pension data that we had. And we found multiple accounts for one pensioner. So all this we eliminated so that the rightful beneficiaries would receive their pensions. And that has been running extremely well. The third one was to do with the staff of PTAD. When I came in, a lot of the staff had not been confirmed. So they
when you say confirmed, their appointments?
They were appointed, but their appointments were not confirmed because they hadn't gone through the civil service processes. So we now went about that, where we had a staff audit, had exams for the staff to get their promotions done, and those that were not confirmed were now confirmed. And through that as well, we eliminated a number of fraudulent staff that shouldn't have been there. Then also the standard operating procedure for the agency wasn't in place. So we put this in place as well. So PTAD has a standard operating procedure, and the staff were all confirmed and have their career progression. So they were very comfortable and happy working with PTAD, and we're now more dedicated to their job. Yes, apart from the staff, we also had the anti-corruption transparency unit in PTAD.
Because I know that I think a few of the members of staff were prosecuted for trying to have one-up over some of the pensioners.
Yes, with the information they had, they were now trying to demand money from pensioners. So we had an aggressive campaign with the pensioners that pension payment is free. Do not pay money to any staff. Then even in PTAD, we had staff from the Accountant General's office, the Auditor General's office in there as well. And I remember we prosecuted one of them, that we proved a case of him demanding money for pension payment and receiving money as well.
So demand and receiving. All right. So, you know, we've always had stories about how people wait in vain for their pensions. They die, and, you know, even their next of kin don't get any pensions. What groups of people were you able to satisfy in that respect? You know, people who had lost hope that they would ever get
Yes.
their pensions?
I'll give you one example. There was an elderly man who had worked under the government of Sardauna.
Sardauna.
Yes, that was how late it was. So during the period of the inconsistencies in pension payment and the fraud and all that, he was dropped from the payroll. So when I came on board, one of his grandchildren got in touch with me. He lived in Minna. And I asked how old he was. This man was in his 90s. So luckily, I had made it clear to the Pension Support Service, our priority are those from 80 and above, so we do not waste time.
Yes.
So I got a team together for them to go to Minna to verify him. I gave the instruction on a Monday. Tuesday morning, I asked if they had gone. They said, oh, no, ma, they were waiting for their payments, their, travel allowance and all that. I said, no, this is not the time for travel allowances and all that. If you have to go, you can take my car and drive straight to this man and get him verified. And I made sure they did that. The following day, they reported back to me that they had verified him, the man. Yeah. And I asked them, please accelerate his payments. You verified all his documents and all. And luckily, for me, this payment was made before the man died, few months after this man died. And I called the same staff that went for verification. I say, you see what the cost of delay would have been? This man would have died without receiving his pension. Though by the time he received his pensions, he wasn't speaking anymore due to stroke and infirmity and all that. But his family said to me, the joy in his eyes.
That his country hadn't forgotten him.
Hadn't forgotten him when they showed him that alert on his phone that these are his accumulated pensions. So to me, that was one of the most satisfying jobs I've ever had in my life.
And the Biafra soldiers as well.
Okay, these are, we call them the war-affected police officers.
Right.
You know, after the war, the policemen, war-affected police officers actually, AWAPO. After the war, there were policemen who were on the other side and the military who were on the other side. Though PTAD didn't handle military pensions, we handled police pensions. We have a department of police pensions. And they had been agitating for their pensions 50 years after the war.
And there was a no victor, no vanquish.
No vanquish, that was what
policy.
That was what General Gawan came up with.
Were they being punished?
They were not being punished. I would just say bureaucracy and prioritization of areas that we administer.
Yes.
And again, I've always believed that in governance there must be empathy. It's key. Every policy we come up with there must be empathy. Yes. Because this affects the lives of our people. So they made a presentation to me, and I wrote to the President Muhammadu Buhari.
Yes.
And he approved for us to put them on the payroll. This was a major milestone. The joy on the faces of these elderly men and women. Because when they came to me, they said to me, the money might not be much, but if they are paid this money, it will show that Nigeria has actually forgiven the war and integrated them back, that they now belong to a one Nigeria. And I'm glad we were able to pay about over 400 of them who were still alive, then the next of kin of the others.
How do you know the real next of kin? When people...
usually when people register for pensions,
yes.
Like if you go to the bank or you're registering for anything, they usually ask you for your next of kin.
Okay.
So it's on there, and it's those next of kin that notify us of the death of the person.
Okay, so the next of kin normally would get the pension if the person has passed on.
Yes, when the person has passed on, we take the person off the payroll. Then what else that is due to the person is now paid. But the death benefits and all will now be paid to the next of kin.
Okay, and that terminates...
That terminates the pension. The next of kin are not on monthly pension.
Okay.
Yes, they just get the terminal benefits.
What is the essential difference between what you did or what PTAD does and what PENCOM does?
What PTAD does is that the defined benefit scheme, the federal government bears the whole of the pension payment. What PENCOM does, contributory, they deduct from wages.
Okay.
Yes, like if you are working now,
yes.
deduct from wages and keep for you. Yes, they have pension agencies that handle it for you.
Can
you have your PFAs, your pension fund administrators that handle it. So for government, for PTAD, ours is outright payment. Government bears the burden of all that. That is why PTAD is called transitionary, because everyone will now transit. When the last pensioner dies in PTAD, contributory pension, yes, through the Pension Reform Act, that was the...
You can't claim the two, can you?
You cannot claim the two.
Fraud.
That is why verification is key. Verification is key, and having a clean, authenticated database is key. And this is one of the major things that PTAD achieved, having a clean, authenticated database with backup.
One of the things that caught my attention was the fact that during some of the verification, I actually saw you on the field, you know, verifying some of the pensioners. I thought, you know, you'd be in your office and the field staff would be doing that.
No, any chief executive who is not out in the field with their staff, encouraging them and supporting them, is not worth his or salt.
And you verified people in hospitals as well?
Oh yes, that was a mobile verification. Most of that I enjoyed leading, to go with them to the hospital to verify them, to save their families from carrying them out in stretchers, which was what was happening in the past.
Before.
Yes, and they losing their dignity, you know. Some come with urine bags and all that. And all that.
Stuff.
And we said, no, we have to restore the dignity of our pensioners, and I'm glad we did.
Were you happy to leave PTAD?
I would say
pensions, that, you know,
you're
just as passionate.
It's not just pensions. I knew nothing about pension before I went in.
Yeah.
I'm just passionate about fighting injustice in any form. So the same way I was passionate about doing the right thing at PTAD, it was the same way I went into environment.
And the same way you've come into Niger Delta?
The same way I've come into Niger Delta. Yes.
Right, so we move on from PTAD. You served there from 2016 to 2019, and then when President Muhammadu Buhari won a second term, you were now appointed Minister of State for the Environment. You resumed there 21st of August 2019.
Yes.
Now, do you ever get a feeling or feedback from Nigerians who feel that these issues of the environment, you know, our misuse of it or our abuse of the environment is not their concern? As we say locally here, waiting consign me with climate.
Yeah, I do get a feedback, because I'm a people's person, so I'm always out on the street and on Twitter, and I engage a lot with the youth.
Yes.
And then, of course, my network of pensioners, I engage with them. At first, the word climate change sounded very strange and far removed from them. But when they started seeing off-season flooding, off-season rain, the drought and all, majority of our people live in the rural areas and they depend on the land. They've seen changes in the land that is now affecting their yield from agriculture. Then I realized this must be what we're talking about, that is climate change. So they are very, very aware of it. And I'm proud of our Nigerian youth who have formed themselves into pressure groups, NGOs, and they're working with the local people on how to adapt and mitigate the effects of climate change. And government has been proactive. The Ministry of Environment has been proactive as well through majority of our agencies, like the Forestry Department, the Flood Control, Erosion and Flood Control departments. They have been working closely with the people, educating our people that climate change is just not a foreign thing. It's a global thing. It affects everyone. And we have seen it clearly. So there's a general acceptance of it.
But you've had to kind of localize the aspects of climate change that affect us.
Yes.
You know, not everything that happens, for instance, in Europe, you know, is the same thing that is not the same thing that happens here.
No, but funny enough, when you're talking about what affects Europe, you find that Africa, we in Africa,
Yes.
the global south, suffers the impacts of climate change more than Europe.
How?
Drought. From the northern parts of Nigeria,
Yes.
you can see it's arid land. Then all of a sudden, you're getting floods. These are things they were not used to.
Yes.
Then in the south, we start getting less rain and the land drying up.
Bodies of water reducing.
Bodies of water reducing. So our people are very much aware that this thing is local as well as being global. So the agitation now is, how does government help them to adapt? How does government help them to mitigate against those things? So that is where the Climate Change Act
comes in.
And that is a very proud moment for Nigeria.
Right.
And it's one of the things the president will be remembered for forever.
When he leaves office.
When he leaves office, he will never be forgotten for that singular act of signing the climate change bill into law.
We'll take our first break now. When we come back, we'll start from that point. Why was it so important that the president signed the climate change bill? So join us again after the break. Welcome back. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari signed the climate change bill 18th of November 2021. Why was it so important for him to sign that bill? I mean, in the light of what you said earlier on, that he will forever be remembered for signing that bill into law.
You're well aware that the impacts of climate change are life-threatening and livelihood-threatening for our people. So having a legal framework to tackle climate change shows the seriousness with which the government of Nigeria under President Buhari takes the livelihoods of our people and their lives and climate change issues seriously.
Yes.
Because with that law now, it will be a coordinated approach, bring together all the different policies, adaptation policies, mitigation policies that different agencies of government, especially the Ministry of Environment, have had in the past.
Yes.
And now bring it all together and have a legal backing and now integrate climate change into most of our development policies across all the sectors, from transportation to housing to agriculture.
So
and of course
there's
environment.
no sector now that has any excuse to not recognize and integrate,
Yes.
you know, those kind of mitigating policies
Policy
into
and adaptation, yes, into it. I mean, majority of them are all part of the Climate Change Council, which the president recently inaugurated, and that's another major milestone. And he chairs that council, and after him, the next president will chair that council. So we are now assured of an integrated approach in tackling climate change issues in Nigeria, and we hope it will translate into budgeting for climate change, and not just climate change as well, budgeting for biodiversity restoration.
Okay, and that brings me to the word biodiversity. I hear that word from you a lot. You use that word a lot. What does it actually connote?
The biodiversity is makes up our ecosystem, the air we breathe, the plant and fauna. You talked about wetlands when we talked before coming on camera. The animals, the oceans, this is all part of our biodiversity that gives us life. So we have to protect it. We're talking about climate change. What is climate change? what is causing climate change. So biodiversity and climate change are intertwined. We're talking about reducing the greenhouse gas emissions.
Yes.
What is the best way to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions?
Yes.
We turn to nature. So in a way, biodiversity is nature. Nature has the solutions. The trees,
That we plant.
the plants that we plant, the mangroves, these are all carbon sinks. The more we have of that, the more reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions. Put it in layman's term. And
Yes.
again, our livelihood depends on the biodiversity. Our people are fishermen, our people are farmers,
Yes.
our people are hunters. Although that hunting one has another angle to it, preservation of wildlife.
Yes.
Yes.
So that they
So
don't
that's
go
biodiversity.
extinct.
Yes, so biodiversity is important, and under President Buhari, a lot has been done on that. And incidentally, he's the president of the Pan-African Agency for the Great Green Wall.
Great Green Wall.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think that was a 2-year term.
It's a 2-year term.
It was appointed in December
December
2021.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there a climate change fund?
Yes, there's meant to be a climate change fund that will be managed by the Climate Change Council.
Right.
And that is why the Minister of Finance and Budget is a member of the Climate Change Council. Because in our budgeting, we have to take into consideration the effects of climate change on not just our livelihood, but our production cycle as well, and the lives of our people. So it's very important that they are all part of it, and the private sector will be involved, because tackling climate change requires a lot of money, and we cannot keep on depending on international aid. If we look inwards, we can do it as well. And that's where we talk about valuing the nature, valuing our biodiversity, valuing nature. You've heard about carbon trading.
Yes.
You've gone to the Niger Delta. You can see the vast expanse of mangroves. I think Nigeria has the world's third largest expanse of mangroves.
Yes.
This is money. So this is one of the things that we had started in the Ministry of Environment, to get the governors and the commissioners of environment in the 9 Niger Delta states to understand the value of what they have in nature.
Okay, so let's look at the World Climate Change Vulnerability Index. They say Nigeria is one of the 10 most vulnerable. We have a high human vulnerability to climatic hazards due, they say, to our high dependence on climate-sensitive livelihoods.
Yes.
Expand on that.
Okay. Climate-sensitive livelihood. Farmers. They depend on the rain for their crops.
Right.
They're at farming season, they try. And that's one area where I would say under President Buhari, a lot has been done in that aspect. There's been areas of climate smart agriculture being taught to the rural people. Even in our collaboration with NIMET, which is under aviation, there are climate forecasts help as well to let our farmers know.
And to plan properly.
And to plan properly. And as I had said to you earlier, majority of our people are in the rural areas.
Yes.
They depend on the land for their livelihood. So if the land is now affected by the climatic changes, what happens? So now you see why climate change efforts and having a legal framework is very, very important, and integrating it in our budgeting and our development plans will go a long way in saving the lives of our people. And remember the issue of, I always try and make this clarification, the issue of herders, farmers clashes.
Yes.
The cattle are moving, looking for water and better grass, and now trampling on
people's farms.
People's farms. I remember when I was in PTAD, driving for verification, I think from Gongola, see me say Gongola, from Taraba.
Yes.
Taraba to Bauchi. And I noticed a lot of bridges, no water. So I'm like, why? In my mind, I'm like, why are they wasting money building bridges where there is no water? I now realize climate change, the rivers have dried up.
That's real.
That's real. It struck me. The rivers have actually dried
So
up.
when we see people grazing with cattle and walking
Looking for water.
huge distances, you know, on the expressway, they're actually looking
For water and food for the cattle. So if that's where conservation comes in. It was one of the areas of priority that I tried to push when I was in the Ministry of Environment.
Yes.
We have to conserve our natural resources, like our wetlands. We have a lot of wetlands all over Nigeria. The last one I went to was the Nguru wetlands. It's a reservoir of water. Around it, people do their farming. Rice farming, it's in the wetlands.
Yes.
You do rice farming.
Yes.
So if we don't conserve these areas that are in our ecosystem, if they go extinct or disappear, what happens to our people who depend on this? Yes. And you see majority of the migration you see from global south, from Africa to the global north,
Yes.
is due to climate change. Climate change is a migration issue as well. People can't farm anymore.
So they have to move to where they can.
Where they can survive, where they can have another livelihood. You know, so all these conservation programs, the land restoration programs that the government of President Buhari is doing under the Great Green Wall,
Yes.
the Cresal, then even the erosion projects that he's been doing in the southern part, as well under New Map, are all part of sustaining the livelihoods of our people. And I do hope that the next government that comes in will continue with these legacies, which are actually life changing for our people.
I suppose that's why your party is happy that they've retained the presidency, so you're guaranteed to continue some of these policies.
Yes, the bane of African development is lack of continuity. I mean, like when I went to PTAD, I didn't reinvent the wheel.
Yes.
I used the Pension Reform Act, which was my guiding principle, was the law, and I followed it to the letter to achieve those successes. So it's the same way as we have the Climate Change Act. We follow it to the letter and we'll achieve successes. So we're glad.
You've mentioned wetlands a few times. So
Yes.
World Wetlands Day is the 2nd of February. It was celebrated 2022 on the 2nd of February. That year was the first year that the day will be observed as a United Nations International Day, following its adoption by the General Assembly in 2021. What are wetlands?
Wetlands are a body of water that houses a lot of plants and animals, so not just fish in the water. Animals around, we have frogs, and animals come there to take water. Our people go there to make use of the water, not just the water, even the reed growing around the wetlands.
Yes.
Then rice farming is part of it. Then wetlands also play a very major role. And they filter the water that we drink, because a lot of waters come through the wetlands. So it's a major part of our ecosystem that we should try and maintain, because during the dry season,
Yes.
a lot of people in the Sahel region depend on the water from the wetlands.
How can we promote the wise use of wetlands? In what ways?
Okay, well, while in environment, the Nigerian Conservation Foundation and some other NGOs had been partnering with the Ministry of Environment, where we go out to the rural communities in the wetland areas.
Yes.
And teach them the importance of not just the wetlands and what they can make out of it. So that has been going well. Even the reed from the wetlands,
Yes.
they turn to briquettes for fuel. So there's a lot of there are a lot of resources that can be gotten from the wetlands. So the people are working closely with us,
On that.
even regulating the fishing in the wetlands as well.
Let's talk about plastic pollution. you had, while you were minister, inaugurated a project steering committee. I think that was in January 2022 to provide direction for the implementation of the marine plastic project in Nigeria. And
Yes.
Lagos State was the pilot state.
Oh, yes.
What is the marine plastic project?
Almost, I would say, about 60% of the plastic waste we generate on land
Yes.
find their ways into the waterways. And at the end of the day, the main reservoir is the oceans. And Lagos is a coastal city. If you go around Victoria Island, Ekpe and all,
Yes.
go to the shore line, you see the amount of plastic waste there. And it's affecting the life in the ocean
Yes.
as well. Affecting boats that have engines, the small fishermen boats that have engines. Our fishermen can't get fish because of the pollution. So it was a project we initiated with the World Bank. It's not just clearing the plastic waste from
Yes.
the ocean,
Yes.
but also creating a value chain
For it.
from that plastic waste. And who better to be part of this? The Nigerian youth.
Yes.
So who have set up a lot of recycling plants.
What kind of solutions were preferred? You know, when you held that World Environment Day, the youth response was great. I remember that. Can you recall the sort of
Yes.
solutions?
I remember when we sent out flyers on Twitter.
Yes.
Twitter was very active in those days. We sent out flyers to the youth to come up with their solutions to plastic waste, and we had a few intergovernmental agencies like UNIDO and all, World Bank and co part of it, to make presentations. And I remember three that came to mind. One of them was a young lady out of Ibadan, or your state, who was using pure water sachets and cotton thread from waste as well,
Yes.
to make beautiful bags and clothes. She was weaving them. She's called Planet 3R. In fact, I have one of the bags here
Yes.
because I never forget her. That's one of the bags. Would you believe this is from plastic waste?
And
Pure water
thread.
sachet. Yeah, and thread. It's like ashoke.
Yes.
You know. And throughout my stay in Ministry of Environment, all the conferences and workshops we had, we made sure we patronized her company to provide the conference bags. Then another young lady, she was now making interlocking bricks from plastic waste. Yes. Another one was recycling by shredding. He had the machinery by shredding the plastic waste back into flakes and now sell back to plastic manufacturing companies to reuse. So the 3 R's of plastic waste management is reduce, reuse, and recycle. So him taking it back into the manufacturing is reusing in a sustainable manner. So these are enterprises that we hope government will continue to support amongst, because we have a brilliant teeming youth in the environment sector. In fact, in all sectors, tech everywhere.
Yes.
Our Nigerian youth are the best.
Join us again after the break. Welcome back. Now let's talk about this habit we have where we want to eat everything that washes ashore. You know, whether it's manatees or turtles or beached whales. It shows that there's so much more to do to educate our people, especially when they are consuming dead wildlife, not wildlife that they've actually killed or slaughtered to eat. What was the strategy there? How do you stop us from converting everything into pepper soup?
Like I've always said, in that battle to combat wildlife, it was another priority area
Yes.
for me in our bid to protect our biodiversity. We'll have to provide alternative livelihood for our people. I mean, the incident of manatee you saw.
Yes.
Usually people will just
That's
catch those
food.
things. It's food.
Yes.
And slaughter it without us knowing. But because of our awareness creation, they now realize that these animals are meant to be protected. So when a fisherman caught one, which was meant for sale or consumption,
Yes.
they now alerted our staff. We have a Nigerian Environmental Protection Agency, NIGER,
Yes.
contacted that agency, and the field officers got in touch with Institute of Oceanography. This actually happened in Lagos, I think, Ekpe area.
Yes, in the Ekpe area.
And they now went and retrieved the animal, explained to the people the importance of it, and put it back. But like I say, beyond educating them, what is the alternative for them? So that is where government, not just federal, state as well, needs to work closely with conservation agencies,
Yes.
governmental and non-governmental, to put hands together to create life. For instance, aquaculture is another area that we could use for alternative livelihood. Farm their own fish, farm their own whatever species of fish. Some have started with snail farming. These are some of the projects that had been done. Snail farming, grass cutter rearing as well. Oyster farming. That brings us back to our mangroves, which is very important for oyster. Oyster grows more in the mangrove areas. So as our mangrove is depleting,
Yes. Oysters are depleting.
are depleting as well. Yes. So once we can have these alternative livelihoods for our people,
Yes.
we will be able to curb the illegal wildlife issue in Nigeria. And at the Ministry of Environment, while I was there, we were able to team up with UNODC and come up with a national wildlife strategy plan, which was launched and had the buy-in of a lot of agencies. Nigerian Customs is there because they are part of those that will stop the exportation of these at the port.
On that video, the rescued manatee in Lagos, I heard one of the locals there, I suppose one of those who actually captured the manatee originally, asking for money. How do you disabuse such a notion of wanting to be paid for losing what he considered to be a legitimate catch?
The way I see it is that we'll have to pay them to protect them. Our rangers are being paid. That's where community being part of that conservation effort is key.
Yes.
So our rangers are being paid at our national parks to protect our wildlife. So we should have community-based ones as well,
Yes.
that will be paid to
make sure.
protect, yes, to protect our wildlife, because we have to understand the level of poverty in the rural areas as well. So every conservation effort has to be community-based. They must have the buy-in of the local community.
And the pangolin, you spoke passionately about that.
It's
when you
another
were,
one that's almost going extinct. Which is so sad.
But it has, they say, much touted medicinal properties. In spite of it being a source of some diseases we find, like coronavirus.
It's not us in Nigeria that know or talk about the medicinal values. It's China. That's the main culprit.
But we eat pangolins here.
It's all part of the bushmeat consumption in Nigeria. That
So
the awareness,
any animal, in
any
the
animal
bush.
that is in the wild, it's like game meat, that is in the wild. That's why I said for us to be able to stop it, we
Yes.
must give them the alternative. The pangolin awareness has caught on. So that is where my key is, that we must you take something from them, you must give them back in return. So there must be alternative livelihood, animal husbandry, fisheries. Give them alternative to hunting wildlife as well.
Your post now, Minister of State for Niger Delta Affairs, since July 2022. By the time you leave in May, you won't have spent 12 months. So I'm not sure if there's a lot for you to talk about in terms of what you've achieved Obviously, you met something on ground. You're preparing your handover notes.
Yes.
So I know that there must be a plan. Knowing you, there will be a roadmap. So talk us through that.
Okay.
What, are you leaving behind in the Niger Delta Ministry?
Okay. In the Niger Delta Ministry, as the Minister of State, I just had 2 departments reporting to me. That was my area of oversight, should I call it, or supervision. One was the Economic Empowerment Department, and the second one was the Community Development Department.
Yes.
And of course, I came in with my experience.
Your PTAD and environment.
Yes, PTAD and Ministry of Environment.
Yes.
And the usual passion and empathy for our people. You come to community empowerment development department. What does the community need? So we've gone out to see what had been done before. One of the ones I went to see recently was in the Egbema or Haji local government of Imo State, which is the oil producing area. And we have a lot of youth restiveness there.
Yes.
It was a huge skills acquisition center, for training of the youth there in alternative livelihoods,
Yes.
which was key. And I've asked that they continue with that. In fact, they are working out their work plan for 2023. Then for the empowerment one, the same thing, skills acquisition, skills training for both the youth and the women. Then at the end of the trainings, they're given farm tools, light tillers.
I was going to say, is there a kind of starter pack?
Yes, there are
them?
starter packs,
Right.
farm tools, tillers and all, for them to continue with what they have learned from these areas. And of course we came up with, I could never leave issues of environment.
Yes.
We came up with the Niger Delta Climate Change Strategy Plan, because the whole of Niger Delta is based on our coastal region, and we have a lot of coastal erosion and flooding. So I hope that will be implemented as the new ministers coming.
Well, thank you very much for speaking with me today and spending an hour with me.
Thank you so much for coming.
And thank you for watching. I'm Angela Ajetunmobi.